It was past midnight under the twin moons of Kelri Prime, and a chill wind swept across the fortress grounds where the warlord Gorr held dominion. The ancient parapets, carved from ebon stone, seemed to drink in the pale lunar light, casting elongated shadows that appeared to move like silent sentinels. Locked behind metal bars, within the cold gloom of a damp cell, sat a woman named Zaira. She was Kellian, tall and slender, her pale green complexion reminiscent of sea foam in moonlight. Her ears, pointed like graceful leaf tips, twitched at every faint sound echoing through the corridors. She wore a collar of shining black metal, the mark of her enslavement, and her eyes bore the haunted memory of decades of cruelty. Once, in her youth, Zaira had been taught the old myths of the Kellians, how they had roamed the stars in unity, forging alliances across the galaxy. But those stories were distant echoes, replaced by the reality of captivity. The Kellians had been conquered, scattered, and sold like precious currency. Now she found herself, for the 100th time, sold to yet another vicious master. Gorr, a broad-shouldered warlord known for his cruelty, had purchased her, adding her to his menagerie of enslaved attendants, dancers, and servants. Zaira dreaded the possibility that this night would be her last vestige of hope, for each new master seemed more brutal than the last, each new cage tighter, each new shackle heavier. As she sat on the cold stone floor, hands clasped around her knees, she heard the distant rumble of engines in the sky above. The fortress's heavy gates trembled as a ship of formidable size and design settled on the landing pad. Though she did not know it yet, this was the harbinger of her deliverance. The vessel carried the elite troopers known as the Black Legion, led by the mysterious and feared Commander Kieran Decker. Zaira curled into a tight ball, drawing her thin shawl around her shoulders for warmth. One thought resonated in her mind: better to die, perhaps, than endure another cycle of torment. Yet, as the fortress doors groaned and new boots marched through the halls, she felt the faint stirrings of possibility in her soul. She could not have known how profoundly her life was about to change. On the horizon, beyond the fortress gates, black spires of rock jutted from the ground, remnants of volcanoes long dormant. Kelri Prime was a harsh planet, its surface battered by unrelenting storms and scorching days. Civilization existed here only because the valuable mineral kelrite was buried deep below the crust. The fortune it promised attracted all manner of outlaws, warlords, and corporate syndicates. Zaira had first been brought here as a trophy, an exotic piece of living currency. Warlord Gorr's fortress perched like a vulture upon the mountainous plateau, encircled by guard towers, each bristling with automated turrets. The approach was near impossible for any standard fighting force. But rumor whispered that if any group could breach Gorr's bastion, it was the Black Legion, a mercenary company rumored to operate on the edges of civilized space, loyal to no empire, beholden to no law except their own. Their symbol, a black phoenix with outspread wings, had become a portent of doom for criminals and tyrants across the galaxy. Zaira learned of the Black Legion's arrival from another slave, a timid older man who once served in the halls of commerce on a distant planet. He whispered that the warlord Gorr had invited Commander Kieran Decker here under false pretenses of forging an alliance. The man trembled as he spoke of it, reciting rumors of Decker's feats, tales of entire starfleets bowing before his strategic prowess, of his unwavering moral code that saw him liberate the oppressed even when profit was not guaranteed. Yet if Gorr truly intended to form an alliance, why did Zaira see additional squads of Gorr's personal guard moving in the fortress corridors that very morning? Why had the warlord ordered heightened security around the slave cells? It filled her with dread, but also with a peculiar sense of anticipation. In her experience, unexpected shifts in power among her captors could yield a chance for escape or salvation, though it also often meant bloodshed. She steeled herself for the next turn of the cosmic wheel, for change always came violently in these corners of the galaxy. The mighty doors of the Grand Hall were fashioned from a rare alloy mined on the planet's southern continent. They opened with a resonant clang, revealing the tall, broad-shouldered figure who stepped inside, Commander Kieran Decker. He was human, though, like many humans who roamed the stars, there was an ageless quality to his appearance, hinting at advanced medical treatments and possibly gene editing. He wore a sleek black uniform with the emblem of a phoenix embroidered in platinum thread over his heart. His hair was dark, cropped short, and his features were angular, honed by years of discipline and command. Behind him, an honor guard of his elite troopers fanned out, each clad in black armor, faces hidden behind reflective visors. At the far end of the hall stood Gorr. He was a hulking figure, clad in battered armor decorated with cruel spikes and the pelts of slain beasts. A line of lesser warlords and advisors flanked him, their expressions guarded. They exchanged stiff greetings. Gorr offered a seat at a lavish table. Bowls of alien fruits, goblets of spiced wine, and plates of roast from local fauna were arranged in an extravagant display of hospitality, an odd contrast to the fortress's otherwise austere environment. At Gorr's command, 2 slave attendants carried a flagon of wine to refill the visitors' cups. Zaira, hidden behind a pillar at the far side of the hall, watched the spectacle. She had not been summoned to serve. Instead, she dared to linger in the shadows. Her heart pounded as she surveyed the face of the man rumored to topple tyrants across the galaxy. Commander Decker did not remove his gloves. Instead, he clasped his hands behind his back, posture impeccable. He surveyed the surroundings without revealing a hint of his thoughts. When Gorr raised his goblet in toast, Decker inclined his head politely, yet touched only the rim to his lips. "Commander," Gorr bellowed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "I have long admired your strategic brilliance. Today, perhaps, we can forge a beneficial relationship, for I hear you are always seeking new alliances, or is it new conquests?" Decker's voice, low and measured, carried a respectful edge. "I am here to negotiate terms, Warlord Gorr. The reach of the Black Legion extends across many systems, and we are open to discussing beneficial trade routes, resource-sharing agreements, so long as they adhere to our core principles." "Your core principles," Gorr sneered. "Yes, I have heard of them. You will not traffic in certain goods, will not subjugate entire populations for the sake of profit. Admirable, if limiting." In the shadows, Zaira felt the weight of the collar around her neck. She longed to shout at Decker, to beg him to see the truth of what Gorr was. But her many years of enslavement had taught her that such pleas often led to severe punishments. She bit her lip, transfixed. "I prefer to conduct business with those who keep their word," Decker replied evenly. "We do not abide by the oppression of free peoples." A ripple of tension moved through Gorr's entourage. Some cast wary glances at Decker's silent troopers. No one missed the emphasis on free peoples. Gorr let out a low chuckle, as though amused by the notion. Zaira did not know how or if Commander Decker planned to address the slave's plight, but something in his calm, unwavering demeanor filled her with a faint spark of hope. She clutched that spark like a drowning soul clutches driftwood. Rumors spread like wildfire through the fortress. Gorr's men seemed on edge. They sharpened their blades, polished their armor, and patrolled the corridors in greater numbers. Zaira heard whispers in the slave quarters that Gorr had devised a trap for the Black Legion. He had invited them under the pretense of negotiation, but once they were inside the fortress, he meant to orchestrate an ambush. The idea chilled her, for if Gorr attempted to betray Decker and failed, the carnage would be unimaginable. If he succeeded, an even darker era might commence under Gorr's renewed confidence. Late that evening, Gorr held a lavish banquet. Musicians played alien string instruments, and a troupe of enslaved dancers performed in the center of the hall. Many of Gorr's sub-commanders arrived, all vying to outdo one another in grandiose salutes to their warlord. The tension in the air was almost suffocating. Commander Decker made an appearance, albeit brief, accompanied by a minimal retinue. He offered pleasant but distant courtesies, all the while scanning the throng. Zaira, made to serve at the tables, felt her pulse race whenever Decker's eyes swept the room. In a moment of near madness, she longed to catch his gaze, to somehow silently convey the desperation of her people's plight. Yet she could not muster the courage. She had been trained too thoroughly in submission. Evening wore on, and the fortress lights dimmed. The air smelled of roasted meat, exotic spices, and the sharp tang of spilled wine. Gorr, seated on a high throne at the head of the banquet table, gestured for a demonstration. One by one, the enslaved performers were forced to showcase their talents, be it dancing, singing, or displaying acrobatic feats. The warlord's guests applauded lazily, some pointing and laughing at the frightened looks on the performers' faces. Zaira knew that soon it would be her turn, for she had been branded a trophy slave. Indeed, a guard hauled her forward. She felt her cheeks burning with shame and hatred as she was shoved into the center of the hall. Soft flutes began to play, and she was commanded to dance. More humiliating than any lash was the forced spectacle, her body moving to rhythms not her own, eyes lowered to the marble floor. Yet in the swirling haze of music, she risked a glance at Commander Decker. Though he sat near Gorr, Decker's expression was hard to read. Zaira saw no open disgust, no overt pity, but there was a controlled tension in his jaw, a flicker in his eyes that suggested more than diplomatic neutrality. She could only hope he was not ignorant of the cruelty before him. At last, the music ended. Zaira escaped back into the shadows, her head spinning and her heart hammering. The taste of salt from tears threatened her composure, but she forced them down. She reminded herself that she had endured worse. And she reminded herself that, in these final moments before the tempest, it was best to remain unseen. They came under the cover of the fortress's own illusions. In the darkest hours before dawn, Commander Decker and his Black Legion moved as silently as specters through the labyrinth of corridors. With expert precision, they disabled security turrets and jammed Gorr's internal communications. Gorr had indeed prepared a trap, but Decker had already anticipated treachery. At the stroke of a prearranged signal, the Black Legion seized control of key access points: the armory, the power generator, the hangar bay. Gorr's men, expecting to pounce upon a dozing enemy, were stunned to find the fortress systematically overrun. The clash of metal and the whir of energy weapons echoed in the halls. Awakened by shouts and gunfire, Zaira cowered in a corner of her cell. She could feel the tremors of explosions as sections of the fortress fell under siege. The lights flickered. Alarms shrieked. Her fellow slaves huddled together, fear etched on their faces. For so long, their existence had revolved around submission. The concept of an ongoing revolt felt almost unthinkable. Yet the chaos offered hope. Through the bars of her cell, Zaira caught glimpses of Gorr's guards retreating, their once menacing postures replaced with desperation. She heard the triumphant war cry of the Black Legion reverberate down the stone corridors. Her cell door slid open with a hiss, destroyed from the outside by a precise energy blast. Dazed, Zaira blinked against the sudden glare of emergency lights. Then, stepping through the smoke, a figure in black armor beckoned. "You're free," a low, modulated voice declared. The soldier extended a gloved hand. "Come with us." The slave collar still clung to her neck, and Zaira had spent so many years in bondage that the words "you're free" felt as unreal as an impossible dream. But the soldier's tone brooked no argument. Zaira staggered forward, accompanied by several others. The corridor was littered with debris and bodies, most wearing Gorr's insignia. As they advanced, the lights revealed more Black Legion soldiers moving methodically, liberating enslaved detainees, escorting them away from the crossfire. Zaira felt tears blur her vision. She had never seen an organized force do this, risk themselves simply to free slaves. The altruism felt extraordinary, almost mythic. Behind her, she heard another explosion, deafening and final. She guessed it might be the main gate crumbling. Smoke billowed, obscuring the path, but the soldier guiding her calmly tapped his helmet side, activating an advanced filtration system. He gestured for Zaira to follow, and she obeyed, heart pounding with a wild, unfamiliar exhilaration. By the time dawn arrived, Gorr's fortress lay in ruins. Some of Gorr's men had surrendered, others fought to the death in a last-ditch stand. The majority fled into the barren wastes of Kelri Prime, presumably to regroup or vanish among the planet's numerous underworld enclaves. Gorr himself was nowhere to be found, though rumors swirled that he had barricaded himself in a secure bunker or attempted to flee off-planet in a small shuttle. On a plateau overlooking the shattered fortress, the Black Legion erected a makeshift command center, a large, black field tent bristling with communications gear and hollow displays. The newly freed slaves gathered under its protective canopy, awaiting medical checkups and instructions. Zaira sat on a flat rock near the tent's entrance. Around her, men, women, and children from various races tended wounds, shared relieved embraces, and spoke in hushed tones, uncertain of what was to come. Even the air seemed different, crisp with the promise of liberty, though overshadowed by the stench of smoke and the disarray below. As the morning sun climbed, Commander Kieran Decker emerged from the tent, conferring with two of his captains. He spotted Zaira's gaze and paused. The slightest nod of acknowledgement passed between them. She offered a tentative nod in return. Soon after, a medtech approached, scanning Zaira with a handheld device. "You've been neglected," the medtech said gently. "We'll get that collar removed, but we have to locate a specialized key or a method to disarm it safely. These devices sometimes contain fail-safes, electrical discharges, or worse." Zaira's fingers reflexively touched the metal band around her neck. She had endured its humiliations for so long that she scarcely remembered life without it. "Thank you," she managed to murmur. The medtech gave her a sympathetic smile. "Commander Decker said we must help you and all the other liberated individuals. He's arranged transport off-world if you wish." Off-world. The word sent a tremor of excitement through her. A chance to leave this prison planet behind, to start anew somewhere else in the galaxy, free of the darkest shadows of her past. It was overwhelming, like being offered a miracle after a lifetime of torment. Her moment of reverie was interrupted by a voice calling her name. She turned to see Commander Decker himself standing at the tent's entrance, his posture balanced between formal command and approachable concern. "Zaira," he said quietly, "may I speak with you?" She swallowed, surprised he knew her name at all, then rose on unsteady legs to approach him. He led her into the command tent. Inside, hollow screens displayed maps of the fortress complex and lines of supply ships that the Black Legion had arranged. She noticed a large hollow projection of Kelri Prime's orbit, highlighting possible escape routes or threats. Decker stood by a table where a half-dozen datapads lay, each displaying liberated captives' profiles. I'm grateful," Zaira began, her voice faltering. "You saved us. We have no means to repay." He raised a gloved hand, silencing her gently. "There is no debt. You and all others deserve freedom." Gorr was an infestation in this sector, and we had reason to believe he was trafficking in more than weapons. Slavery, it's not something the Black Legion tolerates. His eyes met hers, and in that fleeting moment, Zaira sensed genuine compassion beneath the stoic facade. "I've read your file," he continued. "You were on record at multiple slave auctions over the decades. Most of your people scattered after the invasion of Kellian. I'm sorry." She fought the quiver in her voice. "I can't even remember what life was like before. My people's culture, our sense of unity, it all faded into stories. Thank you for giving us a chance to dream again." He placed a datapad on the table and folded his arms. "The Black Legion will coordinate with allied outposts. We're offering transport, medical assistance, and relocation options. There's a world in the Outer Rim where many freed Kellians have gathered. You're free to go there or anywhere you wish." Zaira trembled, her mind spinning with possibility. Could she truly choose her destiny again? Just days ago, such freedom seemed a cruel fantasy. "You've done more than enough," she said. "I'll find my way." Decker opened his mouth to reply, but a sergeant entered the tent, saluting briskly. "Commander, we've located warlord Gorr's personal bunker. It's sealed. We have teams on standby for infiltration." "Orders, sir." A grim determination settled over Decker's features. He turned to Zaira with a look that said there is more work yet to be done. "I'll be back," he said, nodding to her. "Stay here, stay safe. This planet is still dangerous." Then he swept out of the tent, leaving behind an air that crackled with the promise of further confrontation. Zaira watched him go, her heart both light with hope and heavy with the knowledge that for the Black Legion, war was not yet over. A part of her whispered that she wanted to stand at his side, not cower in safety. But she had neither the training nor the strength for such a battle. She was a freed slave, still bound by a collar. Perhaps soon, the medtechs would remove it, and she would taste the fullness of liberty. Yet even as she consoled herself with that thought, a new realization dawned. Something about Commander Kieran Decker had stirred within her a longing far deeper than mere gratitude. She found herself silently hoping he would return to her, that somehow they might meet again in less turbulent circumstances. It was a fleeting fancy, a seed of possibility. But once planted in her heart, it refused to be ignored. Over the next few days, the Black Legion diligently organized their operations on Kelri Prime. They set up temporary relief stations, arranged for the freed slaves to receive nutrition, and administered medical care for wounds both old and new. Through it all, Decker's troopers wore a calm efficiency, as though liberation was a standard facet of their duties. Zaira spent much of her time assisting the medtechs. She offered water and blankets to the newly freed, some of whom were too weak to walk on their own. A gentle sense of solidarity blossomed among the slaves. It was one of the first times they could freely speak to one another, share stories, and even express hopes for the future without fear of lash or punishment. During these tasks, Zaira found herself occasionally searching the bustling camp for signs of Commander Decker. He was usually away, supervising the ongoing hunt for Gorr, but at nightfall he would sometimes return to the command tent, bristling with tension or wearing the exhaustion of battle. In those moments, Zaira felt drawn to him, though she maintained a respectful distance. Their few conversations were brief, logistical, he inquiring after her well-being, she expressing thanks. An unspoken bond seemed to hover in the air, a subtle gravitational pull that both intrigued and unsettled her. On the fourth day, a medtech named Oren called Zaira over. He held a handheld device shaped like a cylindrical rod with blinking lights. Commander Decker personally requested we try to remove your slave collar today, Oren said with a reassuring smile. We've managed to disable any built-in defenses. If you'll sit here, we'll proceed. Zaira nodded, her heart thumping. She seated herself on a metal crate, brushing aside her hair to bare the collar. Oren carefully positioned the device against the collar's seam. A hum filled the air, followed by a click. A tense moment passed, then the collar split open. Oren lifted it away from her neck. She exhaled sharply, touching her bare skin, scarcely able to believe it was truly gone. She felt lighter. Physically, yes, but also emotionally, as though some invisible chain to her past had broken. Oren disposed of the metal band, leaving it with a small pile of other slave collars. Zaira watched them, thinking of all the years of humiliation, the pain she had endured. A tear traced down her cheek, and she did not bother to wipe it away. She allowed herself, for the first time, to cry openly, not from terror, but from relief. You're free now, Oren said gently. She mouthed the words silently, tasting their meaning. Free. She was still lost in that heady realization when a familiar voice interrupted her reverie. Zaira. She turned to find Commander Decker standing a few paces away. The camp lights cast a warm glow across his face, highlighting the faint lines of worry and fatigue under his eyes. He nodded approvingly at the medtech. You did well, Oren. I'm grateful. Oren saluted and departed, leaving them alone beneath the makeshift awning of a portable medical station. Decker stepped closer. He regarded Zaira's newly bared neck. How does it feel? She managed a shaky laugh. Strange. Weightless. Like I might float away if I'm not careful. A flicker of a smile touched his stern features. That is precisely what freedom can feel like, at first. She studied his face for a moment. Commander, I don't know how to begin to thank you. He inhaled deeply, as if steeling himself against sentiment. You owe me nothing. This is the outcome we fight for. If you can rebuild your life, that is all the thanks I need. Still, she ventured, you have a remarkable sense of responsibility for someone who leads a mercenary legion. His gaze flickered to the horizon, where the fortress ruins were silhouetted against a setting sun. Mercenaries are not all cut from the same cloth, Zaira. We fight for causes we believe in, or we do not fight at all. Gorr was a tyrant. We prefer to remove such threats before they expand. Zaira nodded slowly. And you do not plan on remaining here? He shook his head. No. We've uprooted Gorr's stronghold, freed the enslaved. My scouts believe Gorr himself slipped off-world, but his support network here is destroyed. After we see to the evacuation and place the fortress under watchful allies, we'll move on. The galaxy is large, and tyrants are plentiful. She stared at him, a knot forming in her chest. The realization that he would soon depart unsettled her. She had found a strange sense of safety in his presence, and the thought of him vanishing back into the stars left her feeling vulnerable. But who was she to question him, or to ask him to stay? His voice, gentler now, cut into her thoughts. We can arrange your passage to Kellian diaspora worlds, or a settlement of your choosing. I know you must have lost much, but we'll do what we can to help you rebuild. Zaira opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She wanted to tell him that she wished to remain in his orbit, if only to learn more about the warrior who had freed her. Yet she hesitated. Freedom meant choices, and she had never before made such monumental decisions for herself. Finally, she swallowed her trepidation. "Thank you," she said, her voice catching. "I'll consider my options." He inclined his head. Then, as if he sensed the swirling thoughts within her, he laid a comforting hand on her shoulder. Just for a moment, a quiet gesture of empathy in a camp filled with so many souls. She felt the warmth of that touch and tried not to let it overwhelm her. He squeezed her shoulder softly, then released, stepping back. "Rest well, Zaira. You've earned it." She watched him stride away, a black silhouette against the dying light. In that moment, she felt the hush of the cosmos pressing in, as though a new destiny was coalescing around her. She was unshackled, truly, finally, and she found herself longing to stand beside the man who had made it so. Once the initial chaos settled, the Black Legion secured safe passage for hundreds of freed slaves. Cargo freighters arrived, repurposed as rescue vessels to ferry them to new worlds or gather them with scattered kin. The fortress itself was to be left under watch by a coalition of local allies who despised Gorr's reign. Meanwhile, the Black Legion prepared to depart, their mission on Kelri Prime nearly complete. Zaira weighed her options. A few Kellian refugees were heading to a newly established colony on a remote planet named Virus 3. They invited her to join them. It was an appealing path, a chance to live among her own people once more, to reconnect with the culture she had lost. Yet the thought felt distant, lacking the fire of conviction. She realized that part of her was reluctant to leave the man who had risked so much on her behalf. One evening, as the desert winds battered the camp, Zaira found Commander Decker alone by a low-burning fire pit, reading from a hollow tablet. She hesitated, then approached. He looked up, scanning her face. "Zaira, something troubles you." She took a measured breath. "I don't know where to go. All my life, I've been told where to stand, what to do, whom to obey. Now that I have a choice, it's daunting." He nodded, setting aside his tablet. "It's only natural to feel uncertainty. We're leaving soon. If you stay here, you can build a life with the others. If you travel to another system, we'll do all we can to ensure your safe passage." A faint pause. "But if you wish to remain with us, the Black Legion could find a place for you." Her heart stuttered. She had never entertained the idea that she might ride among the Black Legion. "What could I possibly offer your troops? I'm not a soldier. My experiences are, well, you know." "You are resilient," he said with quiet emphasis. "You have courage. At a minimum, you could serve in a supportive capacity, logistics, liaison work with liberated peoples. We have many roles. In time, if you wish to train in defense or strategy, you could. We don't discriminate on the basis of background, only on willingness and loyalty." Zaira's mind whirled. She gazed into the flickering flames. I'm not sure. That life might mean more war, more violence. I've seen enough cruelty." Decker's voice softened. "We do fight, but we fight to prevent cruelty. If you join us, you won't be forced. It's your choice, free and clear. I only offer the possibility." She felt the weight of the moment pressing upon her shoulders. Had she not spent countless nights praying for an escape, longing for a life shaped by her own decisions? Yet the path before her now was not the simple farmland or quiet colony she might have once imagined. It was a life on the edge of known space, under the banner of a commander whose very name inspired awe in friend and foe alike. A life that would keep her close to him. "Thank you," she said eventually. "I need time to decide." He nodded, not pressing further. "Take all the time you need. Just know that you've proven your resolve by surviving what you have. Sometimes that's the best qualification of all." She bowed her head slightly, gratitude swelling in her chest. She took her leave, returning to her tent. Yet her rest was fitful, thoughts swirling with the possibilities of new beginnings, and the surprising warmth that blossomed in her heart whenever she recalled Commander Decker's steady gaze. In the early days of the next week, the exodus commenced. Freighters lifted off from Kelri Prime, carrying hundreds of freed slaves to safer shores. Gorr's fortress was left in a smoldering ruin, guarded by a skeleton crew loyal to the Black Legion's cause. Zaira stood on the landing pad, watching the transport ship that carried her fellow Kellians rise into the atmosphere. A wave of bittersweet emotion washed over her. She felt pangs at seeing them go, but she also felt an undeniable tug to remain where she was. Her path, it seemed, led elsewhere. She had made her decision. She would stay with the Black Legion. She had no illusions about the hardships it might entail, but something called her to see the universe, to stand with those who had saved her, to repay their kindness by lending her strength, however meager it seemed. And perhaps, though she scarcely dared admit it, to stay near to Commander Kieran Decker. When she informed him of her choice, he offered a small, private smile. "We will welcome you. Report to Lieutenant Myra. She'll show you around the ship. The Resolute Dawn is no pleasure cruiser, but I hope you find some measure of peace in the work." That same afternoon, Zaira boarded the Resolute Dawn, the primary flagship of the Black Legion's fleet. The vessel was a marvel of modern engineering, over 1 kilometer in length, brimming with advanced weaponry and cloaking technologies. Her wide corridors bustled with troopers, technicians, medics, and pilots. Though the environment was militaristic, she sensed camaraderie and mutual respect among them, very different from any form of servitude she had known. Lieutenant Myra, a stern yet kind-eyed officer, gave Zaira a succinct tour. They passed the medical bay, the training halls, the command bridge. They ended at a smaller cabin near the lower decks. "This is your quarters," Myra said. "We'll issue you standard gear and allocate tasks as soon as you're settled." The commander said you might initially assist in humanitarian logistics, coordinating relief supplies, that kind of thing. "You'll find it rewarding work, I think." Zaira nodded, stepping into the sparse but comfortable cabin. It was hers alone. No cellmates, no bars, no collar. She breathed in wonder. "Thank you." Myra smiled warmly. "Welcome to the Legion, Zaira." Time aboard the Resolute Dawn passed in a blur of new responsibilities. Zaira learned the intricacies of the Legion's supply chain, helping to route medical provisions and essential goods to various liberated colonies. She marveled at the synergy of the operation. Each soldier, pilot, and technician worked together like parts of a living machine. The focus on justice and protection shaped every decision. She found renewed purpose. In quiet moments, she encountered Commander Decker on the ship's command bridge or at staff briefings. He was always composed, direct, and impeccably professional, yet she noticed the flicker of warmth in his eyes whenever they locked gazes. Their conversations remained largely official, though sometimes he would pull her aside to ask how she was faring. One night, she worked late in a small logistics chamber, sorting through digital requests for vaccines on a frontier world. The overhead lighting hummed softly. She rubbed her tired eyes. Suddenly, the door slid open. Decker stepped inside. "Am I interrupting?" She stood quickly, heart thrumming. "Commander." "No, not at all. I was just finishing these reports." He approached, scanning the crates of sealed medical canisters stacked against a wall. "We moved to deliver these at dawn. The refugees on the palace outpost need them urgently." She nodded, retrieving a datapad. "Everything is ready." For a moment, he said nothing, merely studying her. Then he spoke with gentle sincerity. "You've adapted quickly. You've made yourself indispensable to the logistics teams. I want you to know, I see your dedication." She felt warmth rise to her cheeks, remembering how once she believed she had no worth beyond subservience. "I'm trying. This is the first time in my life I've had meaningful work. I want to do it well." "You are doing it well," he said softly. "More than that, your empathy for those in need, people who were once like you, is invaluable. It reminds the Legion of our purpose." She clutched the datapad, uncertain how to respond to such praise. Her heart fluttered with feelings she scarcely dared name. But something emboldened her to speak. "Commander Kieran, you've shown me more kindness than anyone ever has." "I thank you." He caught her gaze, and the softness in his expression deepened. A tangible current of electricity passed between them. "You don't need to thank me," he murmured. "But I do appreciate your gratitude." For the first time, she allowed herself to contemplate the possibility that beneath the layers of rank and responsibility, they shared a connection, a bond forged in a moment of liberation, tempered by mutual respect. Yet as soon as she felt it blossom, she wondered if the world they inhabited would ever allow it to flourish. After a taut pause, he cleared his throat, stepping back. "We must be ready for tomorrow's deployment." Get some rest, Zaira. We have a long day ahead. She nodded, her chest tight. Good night, Commander. He gave a faint nod and left, leaving her alone in the quiet hum of the ship's logistics center. She stood there for a long time, datapad in hand, heart pounding in the silence. The Black Legion's next mission took them across parsecs of open space, patrolling border worlds rife with piracy and oppression. Zaira quickly discovered that her role was not confined to paperwork. She accompanied Medtech's planetside to distribute supplies, witnessing firsthand the gratitude of liberated villages and the grim aftermath of tyranny. On a nameless frontier moon, she stood in a makeshift hospital tent, handing out ration packets. Outside, the Legion's troopers guarded the perimeter. The local populace had been terrorized by a gang of raiders, and the Legion's swift intervention had brought relief. Yet the devastation was undeniable. Crumbling huts, scorched farmland, orphaned children wandering aimlessly. Kneeling beside a young alien child with tear-streaked cheeks, Zaira offered comfort. The child reminded her of herself, frightened, powerless in the face of cruel forces. She brushed a gentle hand over the child's hair. "You're safe now," she whispered, hoping it was true. She heard Commander Decker's voice at her shoulder. "We've driven the raiders away, but we must remain vigilant in case of retaliation." He crouched beside her, his stern face softening at the sight of the child. "Are you all right?" Zaira nodded. "Yes, just wishing we could do more." Decker's gaze lingered on her. "We do what we can," he said. "Sometimes it feels inadequate. But if we can give them hope, that is a start." She inhaled, meeting his eyes. In that instant, words trembled on her tongue, confessions of gratitude, admiration, maybe more. But she swallowed them, uncertain if she dared disrupt the precarious balance of their relationship. The next morning, they departed the moon, leaving behind a contingent of volunteer security forces and enough supplies for weeks. Zaira watched from a viewport in the resolute dawn as the moon's dusty horizon shrank into the distance, her heart heavy with the knowledge that so many tragedies remained across the galaxy. She found solace in the knowledge that the Black Legion would continue to fight them. Months passed. Zaira's role in the Legion grew. She learned tactical communications, gleaned strategic thinking from the officers, and discovered an unexpected aptitude for bridging cultural divides with newly freed peoples. The crew came to respect her as a symbol of redemption, one who had overcome the shackles of her past to become a vital part of their mission. All the while, her quiet, unspoken bond with Commander Decker strengthened in subtle ways. Shared glances across a briefing room, the gentle ease of conversation in quiet corridors, the unspoken comfort of mutual understanding. Their closeness did not go unnoticed by some, though no one openly commented. The Legion, after all, valued loyalty over gossip. But the specter of her old life was not content to remain a memory. One evening, a coded transmission reached the resolute dawn. Commander Decker summoned his senior staff and Zaira to the war room. The holographic display revealed an informant who claimed to have spotted warlord Gorr in the Orphean Nebula. Zaira stiffened at the mention of that name. He was the last chain to her enslaved past. She never learned exactly how Gorr had escaped Kelri Prime, but apparently he had reorganized, forging alliances with new villains in an obscure corner of space. Decker's jaw clenched as he listened to the informant. If Gorr is rebuilding an army, it's only a matter of time before he resumes his raids and atrocities, the commander said. We must stop him. Zaira felt a chill ripple through her. Memories of dark cells and harsh whips flooded back. Her throat tightened, but she stood taller, refusing to be paralyzed by fear. Commander, she said quietly, let me help. This is personal. I can provide insights into how Gorr operates, how he manipulates fear among his followers. A tense silence filled the war room. Lieutenant Myra glanced at Zaira with concern, but Decker only nodded, resolute. We will need every advantage. Thank you for offering. Thus, the course was set. The Black Legion would travel to the Orphean Nebula, chase down Gorr, and end his menace once and for all. A hush descended upon the ship as they prepared for a confrontation that felt both inevitable and ominous. The Orphean Nebula sprawled across the stars like a river of iridescent light, concealing pockets of ion storms and hidden asteroids. Within its shifting cosmic clouds lay a cluster of small worlds, each one rumored to harbor smugglers, pirates, and warlords. It was there, on a planet named Voronos, that Gorr had established a new fortress, rumored to be even more heavily guarded than the last. The Black Legion's fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the nebula's edge. Immediately, the swirling radiation battered their sensors, limiting their view. Nonetheless, the Legion advanced, guided by informants and updated star charts. Zaira stood on the command bridge beside Decker, anxiety pooling in her stomach. Around them, the crew hurried, manning navigation panels and weapon stations. The hiss of the overhead lights and the hum of the engine underscored the tension in the air. Multiple signals, called the comms officer. Small craft around Voronos, likely Gorr's interceptors. They've spotted us. Decker's tone was calm, yet steely. Launch fighters. Keep the capital ships in a defensive perimeter. Prepare for orbital entry. Zaira felt the ship tremble as squadrons of sleek, black fighter craft streaked into the nebula. She clenched her fists, remembering all the fear Gorr had instilled in her, and refusing to succumb to it. If the chance arose, she would stand face to face with him, no longer a victim but a free woman, a member of the Black Legion. Under cover of the Legion's fighter wings, the resolute Dawn approached Voronos, descending through thick, rose-hued skies. The planet's atmosphere crackled with electromagnetic storms, forcing a rough landing. Decker led the main assault team, while smaller squads fanned out to secure vantage points. Zaira joined the med support unit, wearing light armor with the Legion's Phoenix emblem. She accompanied them as they set up a field station in the outskirts of a bombed-out settlement near Gorr's fortress. Smoke and dust filled the air. Blast echoes rumbled in the distance as the Legion engaged Gorr's defenders, an array of mercenaries, rogue droids, and enslaved foot soldiers. Zaira's heart twisted at the thought. Gorr continued to force others into fighting his battles. As the skirmishes raged, wounded Legion soldiers and rescued captives filtered back to the med station. Zaira assisted the doctors, administering painkillers, disinfecting wounds, offering what solace she could. Tension gnawed at her, an ever-present worry for the commander. At last, word came that Decker's assault force had breached the fortress gates. The defenders were scattering, and Gorr himself had retreated to an inner sanctum. Fighting raged in claustrophobic corridors. Over the comm channels, bursts of gunfire and shouted commands filled Zaira's ears. She found herself pacing near the med station's perimeter, unable to remain idle. A swirl of emotions churned within her, a desire for closure, a fear for Decker's safety, and a growing sense of resolve. She had joined the Legion. She would not shy away from the final confrontation. Summoning her courage, she left the med station, heading toward the fortress. She dodged collapsed rubble, stepping over broken droids and past pockets of smoke. Legion troopers recognized her and nodded, too busy with their own tasks to question her presence. At the fortress entrance, a set of heavy blast doors lay twisted open. She slipped inside, her pulse pounding. The interior was dim, lit by flickering emergency lights and the muzzle flashes of ongoing skirmishes. She followed the sound of battle deeper into the corridors until she reached a broad, central chamber. There, in a swirl of dust and debris, she saw Commander Decker locked in combat with Gorr. Sparks flew as Gorr wielded a massive energy axe, while Decker parried with a crackling blade. Around them lay a handful of fallen soldiers from both sides. Zaira's heart seized. Gorr was even more imposing than she remembered, muscles corded with brutal strength, his face twisted with rage. He recognized Decker as the man who toppled his empire, the same man who had liberated his slaves. Hatred flared in Gorr's eyes. But Decker held his ground with preternatural calm. He dodged Gorr's overhead swing, rolling to one side, then lunged. The blow grazed Gorr's armor, but not deeply enough. Gorr roared, swinging the axe again. The impact sent Decker sprawling across the chamber floor. "Commander!" Zaira cried, surging forward before she could think better of it. Gorr's gaze snapped to her. Recognition dawned. A twisted grin spread across his scarred face. "The Kellian slave," he sneered. "I remember you." Zaira's hands balled into fists. She tasted fear, but also defiance. She glanced at Decker, struggling to rise. Gorr advanced, weapon raised for a killing blow. Without hesitation, Zaira snatched a fallen blaster from the ground. Gorr's attention pivoted to her, scorn shining in his eyes, as if incapable of believing she would dare challenge him. She lifted the blaster, trembling. Though she had practiced with Legion small arms, she had never fired them in lethal combat. But if she did not, Decker would die. When Gorr charged, she squeezed the trigger. The shot caught Gorr's armor, burning a glancing hole. He bellowed in pain, but did not fall. Instead, he staggered, turning his rage fully upon her. Decker took the moment's distraction to leap forward, blade outstretched. The tip of the energy blade pierced Gorr's side, pushing him back. A growl of agony thundered from Gorr's throat, and with a final lurch, he swung his axe at Decker's torso. Decker deflected it with a desperate parry, and Zaira, regaining her composure, fired again, this time striking Gorr in the leg. The warlord collapsed to one knee. Decker's blade descended, severing Gorr's weapon hand at the wrist. The warlord roared, clutching his stump. Then, with surprising speed, he lunged again, forcing Decker to jam a dagger under Gorr's chin. Blood spattered. Gorr gurgled and fell, eyes still aflame with hatred, until they glazed over, dimming forever. Silence filled the chamber, broken only by Decker's ragged breathing. Zaira stood rooted, her heart pounding in her throat. She had just helped slay a warlord, the same warlord who had once tormented her. She almost could not believe it. Decker dropped to a knee, pressing a hand to his ribs where Gorr had struck. Zaira dashed to his side, the blaster clattering to the floor. "Commander, Kieran." He managed a crooked smile, grimacing in pain. "I'm all right," he rasped. "Thanks to you." She knelt, cradling his head in her arms. Adrenaline surged through her, and tears blurred her vision. "I couldn't let him kill you," she whispered. He coughed, and blood flecked his lip. "Nor I you." His eyes flickered with relief and something deeper, affection, gratitude. "Thank you, Zaira." The final echo of Gorr's life faded, leaving an emptiness in the fortress that would soon fill with the voices of the victorious Black Legion. In that space, with the warlord's body cooling on the floor, Zaira and Kieran Decker clung to each other, the weight of the moment forging an unbreakable bond. Their shared pain and triumph cemented a connection neither had sought, but both now found indispensable. Gorr's death reverberated through the fortress. His remaining followers either surrendered or fled into the wilds of Voronos. The Black Legion secured the structure, rounding up the last of Gorr's enslaved captives and freeing them from their collars. Weeks of mopping up operations followed, ensuring no pockets of tyranny lingered in the region. Zaira spent many hours in the med bay beside Commander Decker, who recovered from bruised ribs and a nasty cut across his shoulder. He waved off the seriousness of his wounds, insisting on returning to command duties sooner than the doctors advised. Yet each day, she coaxed him to rest, sometimes with a stern glare that made him smile. Between them, a fragile intimacy formed, a closeness born of mortal danger and mutual rescue. They spoke of small things, favorite foods, fleeting childhood memories, dreams for the future. Though they were both reserved by nature, these gentle, private moments in the med bay allowed them to lower their guards. Decker revealed fragments of his past: a youth on a harsh colony world, an early enlistment in a planetary militia, the tragedies that shaped his code of honor. Zaira listened, heart aching with empathy. One evening, after the fortress was fully secured, they lingered in the med bay as the lights dimmed. Decker was well enough to walk, but found excuses to stay with her a bit longer. She sat beside his bed, her palm resting lightly on his wrist. "Do you regret joining us?" he asked softly. Zaira shook her head. "No. In the Legion, I've found meaning, purpose I never thought possible. But I—" His gaze gentle, he prompted, "You what?" She swallowed, her cheeks warming. "I wonder if there's a place for us. Beyond duty. Beyond battles." A flicker passed across his eyes. Then, in one swift motion, he reached for her hand. "If you desire it, there can be." The hush of the med bay enveloped them. Slowly, gently, they leaned toward each other. When their lips met, it was a tender, tentative moment, suffused with the promise of healing. Their shared scars, both physical and emotional, shimmered in that quiet kiss, forging a deeper connection than either had known before. When they broke apart, Decker's voice was barely above a whisper. "Zaira, you've become my guiding star in this dark galaxy. You shine with a resilience that humbles me." She blinked back tears, heart throbbing with gratitude and longing. And you are more than a liberator. You've given me a chance to dream again. I don't know how else to say it. He brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. Then we say it together, he murmured. In the days ahead, let us see where this path leads. They sealed the unspoken vow with another gentle kiss, the future unfolding before them like an unexplored cosmos. Months later, in the silent blackness of deep space, the resolute Dawn traveled at sublight speed, en route to a remote star system rumored to harbor new injustices. But amid the daily routines of scanning for threats and distributing relief supplies, a quiet celebration took place in the ship's chapel, a small, domed chamber with windows revealing the endless stars. Gathered there were a handful of close comrades from the Black Legion, Lieutenant Myra, Sergeant Oren, and other officers who had witnessed Zaira's journey from captivity to empowerment. Medtechs and pilots looked on, murmuring with excitement. At the center of the chamber stood Zaira, dressed in a simple yet elegant gown that reflected the swirling cosmos outside. Beside her stood Commander Kieran Decker, clad in the polished ceremonial attire of the Legion, his phoenix emblem gleaming. Nervous anticipation crackled in the air. An older officer presided over the ceremony, speaking words that had been part of humanity's traditions for centuries, and now extended to all species of the galaxy who embraced them. We gather here to witness the union of two souls who have found each other in the midst of conflict, who have nurtured love from the ashes of tyranny. Zaira's gaze locked with Kieran's. She recalled her first vision of him on Kelri Prime, stepping into Gorr's fortress hall with an unyielding stride. He had been her savior, then her commander, and now, astonishingly, he was about to become her husband. When the time came for vows, Kieran's voice was firm, yet filled with emotion. Zaira, from the moment I saw your courage, I knew my life would never be the same. You have taught me hope. I vow to stand by you, to protect your freedom, and to honor your strength, forever. Tears glistened in her eyes as she spoke. Kieran, you rescued me from darkness. You showed me that love and freedom can conquer the deepest wounds. I vow to stand with you in every battle, to share every joy, and to never let fear bind me again. They exchanged rings crafted from a rare alloy the Legion had salvaged on Kelri Prime. The metal had once symbolized oppression. Now it was reshaped into a pledge of love. When they slipped the rings onto each other's fingers, the onlookers erupted in applause and cheers. Around them, the star-filled chapel glowed with an almost sacred luminescence, as if the cosmos itself bore witness to this union. In the hush that followed, the officiant smiled, his voice resonating through the small chapel. Commander Kieran Decker and Zaira of Kellian, by the power vested in me by the unified code of the Black Legion, and by the universal bond you share, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss. The crowd hooped and clapped as they kissed, a sweet affirmation of everything they had overcome. Their journey had been fraught with peril, heartbreak, and the scars of enslavement and war. Yet here, in the infinite night of space, their love burned bright and undeniable. Word spread quickly throughout the Legion fleet that their formidable commander had taken Zaira as his wife. While some found it surprising, many celebrated it as a testament to the Legion's core principles, that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, hope, freedom, and unity could blossom. Zaira continued her service in logistics and humanitarian outreach. Over time, she began accompanying Kieran on diplomatic missions, her empathy and lived experience fostering trust among newly liberated peoples. Together, they became a formidable duo, the commander whose reputation for decisive action preceded him, and the Kellian woman whose passion for justice and compassion for the downtrodden won hearts across star systems. Whenever new threats arose, be they rogue warlords or resurgent slavers, Zaira and Kieran led the Legion to stand against them. And with each victory, the memory of her past captivity grew more distant, replaced by the radiant reality of her new life. Late at night, in the quiet confines of their shared cabin on the resolute Dawn, Zaira sometimes lay awake, listening to the hum of the engines. She would gaze at the ring on her finger, remembering every step that brought her here. The terror of Gorr's fortress, the flicker of hope in Decker's eyes, the first moment she realized she was truly free. In those moments, She felt an overwhelming gratitude, not just for her liberation, but for the love that emerged from it, love that transcended all the suffering she had endured. Kieran would stir beside her, sensing her wakefulness. He would draw her close, pressing a gentle kiss to her hair. In the soft darkness, words were unnecessary. They both knew that whatever came tomorrow, be it a new mission, a new threat, or a fresh alliance, they would face it together. And somewhere, far beyond the hull, starlight shimmered, reflecting the truth that had sustained them both. That even in a galaxy rife with cruelty, redemption and compassion could take root and flourish. For Zaira, no longer a slave to anyone's desires, the future stretched out in unending promise, hand in hand with the man who had shattered her chains and won her heart. In the end, their story stood as a beacon, a triumphant testament that love could indeed conquer the darkest shadows, and that the most profound bonds were often forged in the fires of adversity. Their legacy glowed like the stars themselves, guiding others toward the hope of freedom, one battle at a time.